Hi, this is Rob at myquantumdiscovery.com. Today we're going to be going through the process of removing this Samsung Convection microwave and replacing it with a GE Profile Advantium. The model we're using here is PSA 9120 SFSS, and that's the 120 volt version. This is a Entegra Motorhome, and many of the up to about 2016 had this particular microwave. Okay, so what we're going to basically do, the way this works is it's held up by bolts here at the top, and then in the back it's on a hinge, so it's going to tilt forward and down. So what we're going to do is build up something here to support it. And to get to the top, you just pop this panel off. If you have an older coach, good storage space. If you have an older coach, this panel may be held on with screws, so you'll see little wood buttons. You just need to pop those out. And if you move in a little closer here, you'll see this metal bar is what's holding up the front part of the microwave. There are large screws in here, and this is something Entegra provides. Normally this microwave would be meant to install to the bottom of a wood cabinet. As you can see, this bar is crooked, which is driving me nuts, so that's going to be straightened out in the process of putting in the new one. Along the back edge here, you can see the bottom of the bracket, and you can also see that they've probably put silicone in there to minimize any rattling or squeaking noises. You have to excuse my assistant here. Sparky, you going to be helping with this? Yeah, okay. So the next step is I'm going to find something to put on the countertop there that will support the weight of the unit as we loosen up those bolts on the top. Here's a little better view of the top bracket, and also on this particular coach you can see the plug is in this compartment. On other models you may find the plug is behind it underneath, but either way, first thing we want to do is unplug this. So when we drop it down, we won't have anything binding. Looks like the cord is here, so I need to clip that zip tie, and then we'll be ready to start loosening. Okay, so at this point I've freed up that power cord, make sure it's not going to get snagged on anything when I drop the unit out, and set up this little contraption here to get close to the bottom of the unit, so as it comes down off the screws it has something to rest on. Ideally you would probably want a couple people to help you with this, but if you're working by yourself, I think there is a way to do it. Well, we'll find out in a minute. And what I can do is, once it's resting there and the screws are loosened up, again, the front of this is going to tilt down, the back is going to stay connected. Then I can pull the boards out one by one until I get enough angle on it to be able to lift it off. And that's probably where you're definitely going to need a couple of people. Okay, so we're going to start loosening the top bolts. There's only two on this particular unit. They're giant Phillips size. There's not enough headroom here to use a full-size screwdriver, so I'm using a stubby. And I'm just going to make a few turns on each side, a little at a time. Another thing is, you don't want to be resting anything on the bottom edge of this door, because you could twist it if you have any intention of using this oven after the fact. So I'm just holding this up with my right hand, and the bolts are loose enough that I can turn them with my other hand. And there's one. I'll do the other. There's two. Okay, and she's resting on the blocks. I'm going to take a little break and then we'll go on to the next step. Alright, so now it's hinged on the back. I'm going to pull out one of these blocks and let it tilt down some more. Yeah, I can already feel the back of it's coming off. So I'm going to try to lift this up in the back. And there we go. It's dropped down, it's sitting on the stool now. So at this point, all I really need is to lift it out of there and we're done with removing it. I probably should get somebody to help me, but we'll see. Actually, it doesn't really seem too bad. Probably about 70 pounds or so. And that's it. And once you come over here, you can see that the frame that Entegra installs, this is the vent which exits the rear of the microwave. This is the bottom bracket. That'll have to come out. Looks like they put a rubber strip in there to help mitigate any rattles. So, and there's the wiring for the under-counter LEDs. So next we'll remove all of that. Well, we'll remove the bracket and look at the instructions for the Advantium and figure out if or where this has to get relocated to, and then we'll take it from there. Okay, so now I'm just going to remove this lower bracket. There's quite a few screws in there holding that thing on. Just have my drill with a number 2 square bit. Pretty much 99% of the screws you're going to find on the coach are number 2 square bit. And we'll just remove these. One more. There we go. So here I've taken the rear mounting bracket off the back of the new Advantium and temporarily mounted it in place, and I've just lined it up flush with the bottom of the existing plywood assembly that Entegra provided. By the way, that's a good inch thick piece of material there. It's nice and solid. Also, I've marked with blue tape the bottom edge of the filler panel just for reference, and we can get that out of there. So here I'm just using a square and a block of wood to translate the bottom edge of the filler panel as to how it relates to the top edge of the microwave cabinet. The top edge of this bracket is exactly equal to the top edge of the microwave cabinet. So I've marked the back of the block of wood. You can see there's about a ½ inch there. And I've translated that to the tape. So I transferred the mark of the top of the microwave to the piece of tape because I wanted to see how far down below the cabinetry the actual unit will extend, The front part of the cabinet is 15 3/4, so you'll see it'll be about a 1/4 inch below the cabinetry here, which is just about right. And the total height of the microwave is 16 1/4. That includes the bump outs on the bottom for the vent grills and the light and things like that. So I think that's a good height. And if the 1/2 inch gap here became an issue, which I don't think it will, you can always just readjust the filler panel catches so that it covers up more of it, because I believe the top of the filler panel butts right up against the molding here at the top corner, so there's plenty of wiggle room there. The next factor to consider here is the depth of the cabinet, of the microwave unit. The instructions say that you need a maximum of 13 inches between the back wall of the cabinet and the front of the cabinet. Well, as you can see here, we have a little over 14, coming up on 14 1/8, and that's with the tape measure pushing against the mounting bracket. If you come down here and look at the actual microwave itself, and I'm going all the way to the floor here, so that accounts for any protrusions on the back of the unit. We're looking at just about 14 to the crack in the door. So it's tight, but it should work. I think this unit is a little less deep than the Samsung was, and the reason you have to be careful here is because of how, when the door opens, it extends past the width of the microwave. So if the cabinetry is there, you're not going to be able to open the door all the way. So the Samsung cabinet is actually a little deeper, 14 3/16, 14 1/8, around there. And I think the way the door opens is slightly different here too. It's probably the same issue. So there's about an 1/8 inch difference. So worst case, if the depth is just too tight, and I'm going to try it without making any modifications first, but what we'd probably have to do is build this out by a 1/4 inch where the mounting bracket is. And by the way, these vertical pieces in this application, besides positioning the unit initially, because it is representative of the exact height of the unit, of the cabinet, of the microwave cabinet, they really don't serve much function, because we can put a bazillion screws in here, so there'll be plenty of support for the back of the microwave. I was thinking maybe even just chopping these off, because if you don't, and they're not fastened to something, they're going to bang against the back of the microwave and rattle when you drive. Next, we have to redirect the blower so that it shoots out the back of the microwave and not the top. Looking at the top now, basically you can just follow the directions in the manual. It's pretty simple. A couple of screws, you pull it out, twist it around, and when it's done, it'll be coming out the back side here instead of the top. So here we've removed the blower unit and rotated it, and it's in the correct orientation now for blowing out the back of the unit. We just have to remove these dummy panels here. had to fiddle around with that wire a little bit, make sure it wasn't trapped underneath the blower, and then you can just put the screws back in and fasten it back in place. So the Advantium, I think the Samsung as well, comes with this damper unit that attaches past the blower to, theoretically prevent air from coming back in, but this thing's made out of metal, and this is just going to be one major source of rattles. Now the Samsung from the factory, from the Entegra factory, did not have the damper installed, probably for the same reason, and we already have a damper anyway on the outside of the coach that keeps any air from backing in. So I'm just going to leave this off because this is just going to be one major source of noise driving down the road. Okay, so at this point we've finished installing the rear bracket, and I put some rubber weather strip type padding along the lower edge to potentially keep the rattles away. And we've kind of just reversed the process of taking out the Samsung. Just put it up there on top of the stool and then lifted the back edge onto the clips of the back bracket, tilted it up and shimmed it to get it as close to level as possible. And also so we could test the door, and that just barely clears. So bringing it out another 1/4 inch might not be a bad idea, but I'm not going to bother since it does fit. Bringing it out a little would also, these are the vents up on top, and as you can see, it's going to vent right up against this wood. Of course, the other one did that too, so over time that might cause an issue, maybe not. I guess the good thing is this panel can be replaced pretty easily. Okay, so now that's all shimmed up in place and we're pretty happy with the relative levelness. Of course, I didn't use a level on this because who knows if the coach is perfectly level, so I'm just going eyeballing it to make sure it's square with the other woodwork around it, or as close as possible. Now the next step is going to be finishing the bracket work up here. So I'm going to get to work on that and we'll see how that turns out. So taking a look at the new mounting holes for the Advantium, there are 4, whereas the Samsung only had 2. I'm only showing 2 here now. These 2 happen to be in line, and they happen to line up with the slots in the existing bracket. But where those blue pieces of tape are, there are 2 more, and they're not in line. So pretty much going to have to drill all new holes. I'll use the 2 that do line up, and I mark them on the tape, and then I'll use the template that came with the packaging to figure out where the other 2 holes should get drilled. Also too, the other thing that really bugs me about this is if you look at that bracket, it's crooked. It's not level from one side to the other. So I'm going to straighten that out because it'll make it a lot easier. I'll have to put shims, blocks underneath each of those screws. The way it is now, that'll all be different thicknesses. If I level it out, then they can all be the same thickness. So I'll probably, this side looks like, to remove that aluminum and make sure I have something solid to go into, looks like it might be more of a hassle than just prying off this wood strip, which is just stapled on. That wall there is about 1 inch thick, solid. Well, I think it's 3/4 ply with 1/4 inch veneer on either side, so it's at least 3/4 inches thick. so there'll be something good to put some screws into there. So I just took a few seconds to pry that strip off with my trusty little pry bar there. Doesn't say much for how strong that unit was. Okay, so at this point I've redone the blocking on the left side there so that it's level with the right side. So as it turns out, you can't use the original orientation of that upper bracket if you want to have all four of the bolts that support the microwave being used. There is a way that you can get 3 of them to line up, but the only way I could find to get all 4 was to reverse the orientation front to back, and that's going to require drilling all 4 of the holes. So you might want to take a look at how I have the orientation set up here. This is the angle side of it, and I'm putting the template on the bottom of the bracket, and you'll have to measure this distance here. My measurement is 2 1/8 from the end of the bracket to that center line on the first hole. So finally, on my 3rd attempt, I got the holes all in the right place, and so I can put all 4 bolts through the metal bar. I did have to reverse its orientation, so when I put the screws in the end there, it'll just be on each end, it'll just be a little trickier. Probably have to do it by hand, but not a big deal. And as you can see too, I also leveled it. Added this, ripped out the stapled on block and put that one in there. I don't think that's going anywhere. So now all I have to do is concoct some blocking, and it's just about 1.5 inches, maybe slightly less, between the top of the oven and the bottom of the bar. So I'll probably use, because I have it on hand, 2 pieces of 3/4 inch plywood, which should be just slightly less than 1.5 inches, and hopefully that should do it. Okay, so at this point it's being held up by the front bracket and the rear bracket, and I've blocked off the bracket for the 4 bolts that go through the metal brace. I have not yet screwed this in at the ends. I wanted to make sure everything was adjusted the way I wanted it, as far as plumb to the cabinetry and all that, so that everything looks good right now. Looks pretty square. I can open the door. So I'm going to go ahead and put those screws in, and we'll be just about done. Okay, so the project is complete except for cleanup. I managed to get, actually there was no problem getting the 3 screws in on this end. That just goes into solid piece of plywood, which is the side of that cabinet. This end, however, which is the end of the slide room, was a different story. The first screw hole just hit dead air. There was nothing behind it. The other 2, there was probably an aluminum stud or something that I found and was able to get those to bite into something solid. And then, just for good measure, I put a additional screw down into the aluminum channel there. So this thing is not moving at all right now, so hopefully we're not going to have any squeaks when we drive. If we do, we may have to wrap these blocks in felt or something like that. So we'll see how it goes. Now I'm just going to vacuum out back here, and also I'm going to put some aluminum tape here around this flange to seal it off a little better. So this project is just about complete now. I've put foil tape around the the external duct for the vent air. I put it on the tape on the sides and the top. I couldn't reach the bottom. But when I turn the fan on, there's very little blowback inside the cabinet here, so I think it's plenty sufficient, especially considering that, as from the factory, there was no seal there at all. And oh, by the way, this flange didn't require any repositioning for the vent. It lined up pretty much perfectly with the Advantium, even though it was installed for the Samsung.